Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webcast today. My name is Andy Lennox. I'm the president of Logix Brands, and I'll be moderating this relatively short webcast we've got going today. It should be about 20 or 25 minutes long in terms of the presentation. Then afterwards, we'll have a Q&A. You are able on your control panel to tap in questions. Please feel free to tap in questions as they come to mind. We'll try to answer them back directly by tapping answers back, and we may ask our presenter to do some of the questions that come in so that everyone can get the benefit of the Q&A. But we'll see how that goes. Um, we have installation manuals that are available for download, so feel free to download them. They're off your control panel, and we have a brochure that you can download as well. I think that is it. We've got our presenter today is Francis Roma. Francis is our technical director here at Logix Brands, and he'll be taking you through the details of our Halo Exterra product. And fair warning, we do get into the weeds on this. We do get quite technical. We do like to explain all the technical properties of Halo Exterra and graphite polystyrene and all of that. And Francis will get into all of that. We also have here attending as panelists two of our technical people. We have Tyler Simpson. He's our building science manager. He is based in Ontario, Canada, and he handles a lot of the incoming Canadian technical inquiries. And we've also got Garrett Quick online. He's our technical services manager. He's based in lovely Austin, Texas. And Garrett handles a lot of the incoming US technical queries. All right. And so they might get involved here and answer some questions. We'll just see. Without any further ado, over to you, Francis.
Okay, thanks, Andy, and thanks again, everyone, for being with us today for this webcast. Halo Exterra, the advanced breathable exterior insulating sheathing. Before we begin, just a quick background on who we are, Logix Brands. We make a number of foam building products, including Logix ICF, Halo rigid insulation board products, and Heat Sheet, which is an insulated floor panel system designed for in-floor radiant tubing. So when you look at the products we make and the supports we offer, at core, the key problem we help builders solve is a shortage of labor. We're not just there to provide insulation. We are a consortium of EPS molders. We offer the strength, stability, and resources of a multinational organization while providing the support and attentive service that you would expect of a nimble local business. Okay, so what we're going to cover is we'll go over the products of Halo, then we'll get into the features and benefits of using Halo Exterra. We'll compare it with XPS insulation. We'll look at a case study, cost comparison between a frame wall and upgrading it to Halo, some best practices, environmental impacts, tech support that we can offer, and as Andy mentioned, we'll have a Q&A session as well. Okay. So what is Halo? As I mentioned, it's our line of rigid insulation board products. What makes Halo unique is the foam insulation is made of GPS, that is graphite infused EPS foam. So it's basically the conventional white EPS you see today, but with graphite built into it. And that's what gives it its distinct gray color. I'll talk a little bit more about GPS, but for now, I'll just give you a brief intro into our Halo line of products. Halo has 3 distinct product lines, and they're each designed for specific applications. So the first one we've got is Exterra and Exterra FR, which is both used for above grade and below grade interior insulation. The difference between Exterra and Exterra FR, they both have a reflective laminate, but Exterra FR has been tested and approved for use in the US without an ignition barrier. We also have Exterra and Exterra Plus, which is used for below grade and under slab insulation. Exterra has a thick polypropylene laminate. Exterra Plus has more durable woven polypropylene fabric, so it can take a lot of abuse on site. More suited for commercial, but it can be used for residential as well. And finally, we have Exterra, which is used for above grade exterior insulation, and that has a perforated laminate over the insulation. So our Halo product lines are designed to provide continuous insulation for the entire building envelope. For this webcast, we'll be talking about Halo Exterra. Again, that's used for above grade exterior insulation. It's simply composed of two components. That's the GPS foam insulation with the perforated laminate. With that combination, we're able to create an exterior insulation product that has high stable R values, acts as a water resistant barrier, and is permeable enough to allow proper drying of the wall assembly to the exterior. Okay, so let's go over some of the main features of Exterra. It's increased durability and flexibility, and that's due to the lamination. It's extremely flexible. You can wrap this around most radius walls without it even cracking on you. It also provides a strong bond for tape sealing joints and penetrations. It has an R5 per nominal inch, which is higher than conventional EPS and at par with XPS. High vapor permeance. We perforate the laminate to allow drying to the exterior up to 2 inches thick. It also acts as a water resistive barrier. The combination of the lamination and the thickness of Exterra has been tested to show that you don't need an additional house wrap when you use Exterra, provided it's 9/16 of an inch or thicker. There's also reflective benefits. It can reflect heat to the exterior if a gap is provided between Exterra and the cladding. Okay, so those are just some of the features and benefits of using Halo Exterra. I'm going to talk a bit more about the insulation we use for Halo, which is graphite polystyrene. So graphite polystyrene, it's comprised of many small pockets of air within a polymer matrix containing graphite. So basically what it is your basic white conventional EPS, but with graphite added to it. We know that EPS is a good insulation material because it's good at resisting heat flow. But when you add graphite to it, it not only resists heat flow, it also reflects radiant energy. So it results in a higher R value compared to EPS, your conventional EPS. Its R value actually increases as temperatures drop as well. So GPS offers higher R values than conventional EPS, but let's look a little closer at some of the properties of GPS and compare it to XPS. We know we can match it for flexural and compressive strengths, but there's 3 properties of GPS that we think outperform XPS, and that's the R value, vapor permeance, and water absorption. Okay, with the R value, GPS has a higher long-term R value than XPS. So GPS provides zero thermal drift of R value, meaning it has a long-lasting stable R value. It's not going to drastically reduce over time. With XPS, it uses a blowing agent in its production, and that blowing agent is known to leak over time during its use, and as it does, it reduces its R value. And because of that, standards require that XPS insulation state long-term thermal resistance. And you'll notice in a lot of their warranties, they typically state 90% R values retained long-term. So if we consider this, XPS long-term has an R value of about R4.5 instead of the R5 per inch they typically report. And that's actually less than GPS. So short-term R values, GPS and XPS are about the same. When you consider long-term R values, GPS doesn't lose its R value, so it actually has a higher long-term R value than XPS does. So when you're dealing with GPS, you're getting the insulation value that you designed and paid for, and it's going to last long-term. One thing worth noting on the Canadian side is the developments in the CAN ULC standard for rigid foam insulation, S701. They've always required XPS installation to test long-term thermal resistance. Prior standards allowed up to R5 per inch to be reported, but now that's been reduced to R4.7 instead of R5. What's worth noting is that this R4.7 actually represents the R value of our XPS installation about 5 years from production. But because it does continuously reduce its R value over time, you can expect it to be lower than R5 or R4.7 beyond 5 years. If you want to know more about this, we do have a tech bulletin on our website that goes into more detail. Okay, with vapor permeance, GPS is more than twice as permeable as XPS. Permeability equals breathability, so the more permeable the exterior insulation, the more breathable it will be. And the more breathable it is, the higher drying capacity your wall assembly will have. With Exterra, we perforate the lamination to make sure that the wall assembly can dry to the exterior, and it's able to do that with up to 2 inches of Exterra. With XPS insulation, it's typically a low permeance material. Even at 1 inch thick, it could act as a vapor barrier. And in Canada and the northern parts of the US, codes require a vapor barrier on the interior side of your wall assembly. But if you use XPS on the exterior, then chances are you may be putting a low permeance product on the exterior, which could lead to the double vapor barrier effect, which we know can lead to all sorts of issues with your wall assembly. So with XPS, there is more potential to trap moisture in the wall, and because of that, have a lower drying capacity. Just as a comparison, what I've got here on the top is Formular, which is made by Owens Corning, and I believe that's used for above grade exterior insulation. If we compare it to Exterra, the perm rating for Formular is 0.2, and that's at 1 inch thickness. With Exterra, it's 1.3, and that's at 1.5 inch. At 1 inch, it would be even more permeable than that. So as you can see, for Exterra is just over 6 times more permeable than Formular is. In Canada, they use Formular C200, and it has a perm rating of 0.8, which is considered by code a low permeance material in Canada. So in order for your wall to dry properly to the outside, the more breathable your exterior insulation is, the better drying capacity it will have. With Exterra, up to 2 inches thick, it'll allow your wall to dry to the exterior. With Formular, it's a low permeance material, even at just 1 inch thick. Okay, so for water absorption, GPS retains less water than XPS. So there's this misconception out there that EPS is an inferior product to XPS because it has a higher water absorption value, so you can't use it for certain applications, especially in potentially wet environments. EPS does absorb more water initially because it is more permeable than XPS, but because it is more permeable, it allows that water to escape, so it does a good job at retaining its R value. Unfortunately, the standard test for water absorption is based on short-term testing, so it doesn't reflect any of this. The standard, which is ASTM C272, requires small samples to be totally immersed in water for up to 5 days and then immediately measured for water absorption. The problem with this test, though, is it doesn't really tell you how much water is still left in those samples, a month, a year, or even 2 years from now. So it's not really reflective of real world conditions. It only tells you water absorption within that 5-day period because it's only meant for quality control purposes during production. It's not meant to represent end use conditions. And it states that in the standard itself. So, many designers see these values that we have to report, and I think they get the impression it reflects end use conditions when it actually doesn't. But we know from independent studies that that water absorption has an effect on long-term R values. We know from these studies that EPS retains less water than initially absorbed, and that's because of its high permeance. So it may absorb more water than XPS during this 5-day test, but when you consider long-term conditions, any water that gets in there escapes just as easily because of its high permeance. So it does a good job at maintaining its R value. With XPS, it retains absorbed water longer, and that's because of its low permeance. So it doesn't absorb as much water as XPS or EPS during that 5-day test, but when you consider long-term, any water that makes its way in there stays trapped in there longer because it has a tougher time getting out. So as long as the water's sitting in there, it's reducing its R value. There is one study where samples were buried for 15 years, it showed that XPS had on average 19% water absorption and retained only 52% of its R value. With EPS, it retained 5%, it had 5% water absorption and retained 94% of its R value. So this is just indicative of the permeance properties of both these materials. But what does this all mean? Basically, the higher the permeance of your rigid insulation, the less water it's going to retain and the better drying capacity it's going to have. And this is what GPS can do more effectively than we think XPS can. Okay, so that's why we chose GPS as our insulation material for Halo. It provides all the benefits we were looking for: high stable thermal resistance, comparable to XPS, higher long-term R value. It's more permeable than XPS, so it doesn't retain all that water, and it acts as a water-resistant barrier. Okay, so let's talk a bit about environmental impacts, and we'll talk about graphite polystyrene, the GPS that we use, or the insulation we use with Halo. It's actually a clean, sustainable insulation material. It produces low carbon emissions, low global warming potential, and it uses less fresh water and less material used in manufacturing than any other rigid insulation product. And speaking of fresh water, let's look at it more closely. This is a chart that was produced by, we got the information from Neopor GPS, which is made by BASF. And Neopor GPS consumes 40 times less fresh water than Formular 150 NGX, which is insulation product by Owens. To put this in perspective, one 4x8 sheet, to produce one 4x8 sheet, the amount of fresh water that Neopor uses will allow about a 50-second rinse. With Formular, the same board uses enough fresh water that you could take a 33-minute shower with. So that's a significant difference. This is another chart that was produced by BASF with their Neopor GPS installation. They're one of the leading GPS installation providers out there. But as you can see, Neopor GPS contains 61% less global warming potential than Formular does. Okay, so to quickly drive the point home, this is an infographic produced by a notable sustainable proponent. And it shows the carbon emissions for homes. The one in red shows what emissions are for most new homes, which is up to 500 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalency per square meter, which is quite a bit in terms of emissions for carbon dioxide. When you use XPS with that insulation, it drops down to 250, which is an improvement, but doesn't quite hit all carbon emission targets. When you're using GPS, though, you're cutting your emissions by up to 75%. So Halo GPS is the fresh, proven alternative to XPS that is perfectly designed to meet more stringent emission targets. Okay, so let's move on to this case study with a wall assembly. What we're going to look at is a wall assembly that's framed and what it's going to cost to upgrade it with Halo Exterra. So what we've got on the left side is a 2x6 wall with R20 and R24 cavity insulation and building wrap. So that gives us an effective R value of R17 and R18.7 respectively. To upgrade that with Halo Exterra, we've replaced the building wrap with Halo Exterra, and we've kept the R20 cavity insulation. Just by making those two changes, we've increased the R value up to R23. So let's look at what the cost is to do that upgrade. So mind you, this chart was developed by an independent builder who came up with the costs a few years ago. It's obviously going to be different in your regions, but it does give you an idea of the value proposition of this, of what it costs to upgrade to Halo. So what we've got here is an R20 frame wall assembly. For the given area, the cost to do this wall is about $8,800. To upgrade it to an R24 frame wall assembly, the cost jumps up to about $53,300. That's a increase in cost of 9% to get an increase of 9% in insulation. So to upgrade it from an R20 to Halo Exterra, we're looking at an increase of up to 55,500, and that's an increase in 13% in terms of cost. But within that increase in costs, you're looking at a jump of R value up to 34.5%. So it not only increases your R value, but you are getting a more energy efficient wall assembly because it is providing continuous insulation for your envelope. So it is getting rid of some thermal bridging around your building envelope. So that's an idea. Hopefully that gives you an idea on what the cost is like when you're upgrading a frame wall with Exterra. Okay, moving on with Exterra installation. Fastening, you can use cap nails, roofing nails. All you need to do is really tack it in place. The cladding and strapping will help secure it further. For sealing, use construction tape for all seams and penetrations. Seal the top edge with caulking. An irregular cut can be sealed with expandable foam. Strength and durability. Exterra is not structural. The wood sheathing or bracing is going to provide the strength for your wall. Halo is lightweight though and easy to handle, but extremely flexible and durable against site breakage. There's really no seasonal limitations to using Halo Exterra. Just keep your sealants and tapes warm during colder temperatures. For pest control, there's no additives available for rigid foams that are approved in Canada as far as I know. Your exterior cladding detail is going to be your first line of defense, including adding items like bug screens. In the US, there's certainly different methods that you can use by code. We do have built-in termite protection with our Exterra boards. We call it Exterra TK series. So if you need to have some level of pest control, Exterra TK series is the product to use for that. In terms of cladding options, basically anything that you would put over a frame wall assembly, you could use with Halo Exterra. This is just a simple detail example of some of the details that we have available. This one is a foundation transition to the above grade wall. In this detail, we've got Halo Exterra against your wood rigid sheathing, and it does show rain screen detail with wood strapping. So wherever the wood strapping and Exterra terminate, there is a bug screen detail in there to protect Exterra. Again, this is just one example. There's many different ways of doing this, and it will obviously differ in your region, especially if you're in the States. You likely won't need the bug screen if you're doing other alternative methods for pest control. So that's just some examples of installation and detailing. It's really no different than what you would do with other rigid insulation board products. If you used other board products, then you'll find using Halo Exterra is just as easy to use. In fact, it's probably more user-friendly considering that it doesn't break like other rigid foam products do. In terms of technical services, we answer building code issues that either the builder, the owner, or the designer may have, or if you've got issues with the building code officials, we'll address those concerns for you. We do have CAD details. If you can't find a CAD detail that you're looking for, we'll help develop a detail that will hopefully work for your project, and we'll do that in-house for you. We have all the relevant testing and evaluation reports, technical bulletins, specs, and data sheets. We do have an install guide as well. It's worth looking through the install guide. There's a lot of information in there that I didn't get a chance to talk to here, including fastening, bracing walls. So it's worth looking through it, and it's a very illustrative guide. We do have a technical library, so everything I talked about here, including other items I didn't get to, you can find in the technical library. We also have a tool called the 1-minute R value calculator. And what it is you basically go in there, it'll ask you to put your wall assembly together, and it'll calculate your effective or your total R value for your wall assembly. And if you're trying to hit certain target levels by code, it'll tell you if you hit that level, and it'll spit out the report. So you can fine tune the wall assembly to hit certain target levels that you're looking for in terms of R value. Certifications, we have CCMC and QAI listings in Canada, and we have been tested to S701. In the US, we have been tested to C578. We are QAI listed there as well. And the GPS installation we use is all UL listed, both in the US and Canada. We do have local dealers, and if you're looking for samples, get in contact with us, and we'll get someone in touch with you locally. All right, so that brings us to the end of the presentation. Hopefully that gave you a better idea of Logix brands, our Halo Exterra product, its benefits and features, how it compares with XPS installation, the best practices, environmental impacts, and the kind of support that we can offer. We do get a lot of questions throughout the day, and we're happy to answer any questions you have, whether it's building code related, construction, or design related. We're here to help you out as much as possible. Okay, so with that, we'll open up the floor to some Q&A, and what I'll do is I'll hand it off to Andy to take the reins on that.
Hey, thank you very much, Francis. You know what? A few questions have come in, but I've answered them directly. If anyone's got questions, please fire them in, and we can cover them. One question here, Francis, and it's not specifically about Exterra, but it's Mario has asked, could he use Subterra under a slab on grade?
Can you use Subterra under slab on grade?
Yes.
Subterra, yeah, basically yes. That Subterra was designed for that specific application. So if you're looking for installation under your slab, Subterra is a good choice for it.
Okay. Now, Rob is in Canada and is in Saskatchewan. Now he's looking for a custom thickness, and I know I've already told Rob we'll get him in touch with the right plant. He was looking for an R41 in a roof, a panel thickness. Have you heard of us kicking out a thickness of R41, Francis?
For a roof assembly?
Yeah.
I haven't heard it. Maybe Tyler can speak to this, but if that's what he's looking for, if the plants can produce it, we can look into that wall assembly and see how it works for him.
Okay. I think probably we've certainly seen the plans kick out a lot of different custom thicknesses, so
Yeah.
I'll get the proper plant over. And what's the best way, Wayne just had a question, what's the best way to attach to concrete? Okay, so if you're insulating above ground, so this is kind of probably more of a Subterra application, Francis, but I'm not sure. It could be Exterra. Um, Foundation coming out of the ground, it's the above grade, the
Yeah.
above grade portion that's got to be finished. What's the best way to attach Exterra to that concrete band?
Best way to do that, really, yeah, that would be a Subterra product application. And it will be sticking out of the ground above grade. We find that using concrete fasteners with washers are probably the best way to do that. You can tack it into place temporarily with PL, but to secure it, concrete fasteners with washers is probably the best approach for that.
Okay.
And I would
Yeah.
look through the install guide because it does talk about it, I believe. So it's worth looking through there.
Okay. And we're actually veering off course actually into another Subterra question, but Jeffrey was inquiring. He has heard, and he's heard correctly, that Subterra is not a vapor barrier. do you still use, if he's insulating under slab and he wants his vapor barrier under slab, does he still use 10 mil vapor barrier um, like
Yeah.
poly with Subterra?
So with Subterra, we've got two products, Subterra and Subterra Plus, the more durable laminate on it. They
Yep.
both been tested and they both show they are a vapor barrier. So they
Oh,
can
I was
be,
wrong. Oh,
yeah,
okay.
they can act as a vapor barrier. You just keep in mind that under radon applications, Subterra Plus is the product to use for that because it has been tested for it. So that's the only thing you have to keep in mind.
Okay. Very good.
I
Alrighty.
do have, sorry, Andy, I forgot. I do
Yep.
have a few slides up that I came in terms of questions that I've answered. Do you want me to go
Okay.
through it, or are we out of
Just a
time?
couple. Let's just go do a couple and then we'll get right. We'll finish right up.
Okay, so one of the questions was how long can Exterra be exposed to sunlight? So if you look in our install guide, it recommends 30 days. It has been tested thoroughly for UV exposure, and 30 days seems to be a good time frame for that. You could leave it on if it's milder weather, but once the graphics on it starts fading, you should start covering it up. Exterra compared to close cell spray foam, they're, Exterra and close cell spray foam, they're both different applications. With the spray foam, you can use it between the studs and use Exterra on the exterior. So the spray foam would provide your air barrier and Exterra would provide your exterior insulation and water resistant barrier. Fastening, cladding over Exterra. I would go through the install guide because it does get into fastening. So that's a good place to look into that. Some cladding suppliers do have their own recommendations as well. So you should follow those as well. And I believe that's all I've got.
Alrighty, Francis. Well, thank you very much. Like to everybody, thank you very much for spending your time with us. We always appreciate it. Um, at the end of this session, or about an hour, within an hour, you'll get an email from us. You'll have a link to a recording so you can visit this afterwards if you wish. But if you do have any other questions that we haven't answered, and if you do want any follow-up at all, please let us know and we'll get the right people in touch with you. Once again, thanks for your time and attention. We always appreciate it. And Francis, the last word to you.
Thanks again, everyone. We really appreciate it and enjoy the rest of your Friday and the weekend.
Have a good weekend, all.